on March 29, 7:01, and we're going to go around the table and just identify ourselves for the record. So Heather, would you begin?
Heather Moore, Finance Committee.
Bill Landry, Finance Committee.
Dick Vandenberg, Finance.
Howard D'Amico, Finance Committee.
Lynn Missouri, Finance Committee.
Carol Golinsky, Finance Committee.
So we have our quorum. All right, we're going to begin with Mike Fitzpatrick, not of BVP.
We have two Mike Fitzpatricks. Should have let him walk up first.
Yeah. So tell us
Good afternoon.
why you're here, Mike.
I figured you'd want to see me.
Yeah.
But anyways, we went through the capital process, and we were presented with quite a few requests this year. The total request was $3,737,696. So we went round and round trying to figure out what was most needed, and we settled on the list of things that are on SharePoint, which is the vehicle purchase for the building department, along with the paving of the post office, social center parking lot. The fire department replaced a 1999 engine 1. The highway department to match the Chapter 90 funds. The police department and municipal center replaced the security cameras and a server. In the school department, high school steam jacketed kettle, along with a middle school convection oven. The total that we came up with out of free cash would have been is $1,260,048. The additional $50 will be raised and appropriated through the permit fees.
Okay, any questions for Mike? So Mike chaired the Capital Improvement Committee, and the list you have in front of you is the result of weeks and weeks of the committee hearing from the various departments and prioritizing things. So, anyone? Questions for Mike?
Just curious about the convection oven for $9,500.
Curious in which way?
Is that something that's the cafeteria, I take it?
Yes, it is. So in preparation of their food for the students, these are two pieces of equipment that are aging quite a bit, and they're having trouble servicing them and getting replacement parts.
Mike, can you or maybe Chief Vincent walk us through a little bit in terms of the vehicle for the fire department, where that leaves us once replaced, what our vehicles would be, what our fleet would be, the years on, what's the expectation of need further next 3 to 5 years?
Sure. So, Chief, could you come up, please? Sure.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well,
How's everyone doing? I'm trying to find my spectacles,
that's all right.
and I don't think I'm doing a very good job. Nope, they're not there either. Okay, we'll go without.
So Chief, I think just, it's a practical question. What's in your garage?
Okay, when I first started, we had a 62 International. I started in '97. Engine 1 was bought, was in the process. It got approved in '98, I think, and we got it in '99.
Okay.
So it's 23 years old, in the fall it'll be 24. It's a pumper. It pumps 1,250 gallons a minute.
The old one, the current one.
Correct. The current one. It carries 1,000 gallons of water. So it's important that we go by National Fire Protection Association standards on safety and equipment like that. Obviously, you understand that a cell phone, the technology changes like overnight, but we're talking a quarter of a decade. We're buying a minimum of 1,500 gallon per minute pumps now, and we like to at least have our trucks carry at least 1,000 gallons of water. 70% of our homes in the town are out of the water district. I mean, right along Main Street and some of these side roads around the center of town, there's always water, but as we get further and further out into the town, we don't have hydrants or the pressure is very low. And when ISO, the Insurance Services Organization, comes in and sets our rate for insurance purposes, they look at the age of our apparatus and how often how we align our things with the testing of our ladders and our truck, our pumps. We recently had the pump repacked. It was like 5 years ago, and the gentleman that came and does our work, he's become very trustworthy and is able to solve a lot of problems. But we had an issue with the pump, and we think it's going to be like a $25,000 to $40,000. And it's the truck's not even worth that. It doesn't make any sense to put that type of money into it. But having that second engine, we bought one 5 years ago because we had taken a tanker out of service and a rescue. So we actually got two for the price of one for a truck. That has a 1,500 gallon per minute pump on it. It can pump foam as well as water, and it has 1,000 gallons of water. But from a firefighting perspective, we want to be able to, when we get outside of the water district or even in the water district, we have needs of carrying as much water to the scene as possible, because it might be a little while before we have it. And if we have to set up a tanker shuttle, that would be a lot of mutual aid trucks coming in, and we would put portable ponds, and then we would have to draft the water out of those ponds with the engine. So it comes down to being able to move a certain amount of water efficiently and quickly. It also comes down to safety, because if you have a primary pump, normally if you attack a fire and you put firefighters interiorly, it's in the interior, you would call that an attack hose line would go in and you would attack the fire at the seat of the fire. But you also want to have a backup that would come off a different pump. So if there was a catastrophic failure, your backup line wouldn't kill both of your hose lines. So it's a matter of redundancy of water and just making sure we can get the water, and so that we're able to protect the citizens and the firefighters as best we can.
What do we have in the garage?
Oh, I'm sorry. Right now, we have a 2001 tanker. It's 2,500 gallon.
Okay.
We have
That's a new one.
no, it's 2001.
Oh, 2001, all right.
So that's on the list, coming down the list.
That's what I'm trying.
Right. So that is 22 years old. We have our ladder truck that we got on a grant back in 2005. It was a $500,000 piece of equipment. It's probably close to $1 million now. That's going to be 20. Let's see. No, that's going to be 20 years old, probably 19 years old. So it's approaching. And the other thing is NFPA sets a standard of 15 years, 20 years.
Understand what's in there.
Pardon me?
Just trying to understand what's.
Yep, and the last piece is the truck we bought 2 years ago. I'm sorry, it's 5 years ago.
Yep.
That's the rescue pumper. We replaced 2 trucks with 1. So anything that we had jaws of life and things like that on that truck, and fire suppression, we replaced with 1 truck. We put the rescue out of service.
And that was what year?
That's a 2017 that we have. So the 3 that we're talking about would be replacing engine 1 that's 24, it's going to be 24 years old in the fall.
That's a tanker, the 2001?
No.
No, that's a pumper.
In front of you.
That's a pumper.
This capital improvement.
Yeah, that's replacing which one?
The
Engine 1.
engine 1 ladder. I assume that's a ladder.
No,
right?
engine 1 is a strictly a pumper truck.
Oh, okay.
And that is
The ladder-
what year again?
1999.
Okay.
Then you have the next newest one, or next oldest one, is a 2001. That's a tanker,
Okay.
or a tender. It carries 2,500 gallons of water.
Okay.
Then you have the ladder.
Yep.
That's a 75-foot quint with a 1,500 gallon per minute on it. It only carries 500 gallons.
Okay.
So that's what we have. So you've got 3 that are approaching, 2 that have already met their useful life according to NFPA. NFPA says at 25 they should be retired.
Okay, what, how many years do they?
Well, Douglas has been pushing the envelope on those. We're trying to get it to the point where we're able to buy them more often newer, and we talked about a plan as to how we could do that, so that we're not always getting a big hit like this. We'd like to maybe put away in a little fund something out of capital every year that we would use for a large purchase for something like this, so that we're not in this boat again.
Budgeting.
What's the
That
difference?
answer your question, Howard?
That's, yeah.
What's the difference
Your line of questioning is still going. I'm waiting for Howard.
besides the amount of water they can carry?
That's it.
That's it?
It's it. The tanker carries about 1,500 to 2,000 gallons more of water.
Right, now would they cost a lot more money, or?
I'd say they're about the same as a pumper, maybe a little less.
Yeah.
So the 2001 tanker serves now, and with this, I guess the 1991, you're looking to replace it with a new, and that would give you what kind of gallonage altogether?
That would give me 2,000 with those two trucks, 2,000.
1,000 apiece.
Right, and then we would still have the other one, the other pumper, that would be 2,500. So now you got 4,500 gallons of water, and,
Wow.
yeah.
So there's 4 trucks.
Yep. That's what I was trying to get to, but I wanted to give you the ages of them so that you can understand.
And is there any perception of the committee at the moment when we might start to actually see a proposal?
A strategic poll, yeah. Where we just started talking about that. That's something that we're working on, not at a point where you want to present anything like that. I would rather have it done properly.
But with what we just outlined, we could see 2 trucks needing possible replacement in the next 5, 6, 7 years, right?
I would see another truck in 5 years, yes.
Okay.
That's just my own assessment, but I'm not in his department. I don't know what he actually needs.
So Chief, just one ladder, right?
Yep.
That's the 2,000.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And what will you do with the old truck?
We'll be getting rid of it.
Okay, sell it?
Yeah, if we can get any money for it. I mean, I would think it would have some value, but I honestly don't know. I know that with the market right now, sometimes even used trucks are worth a little bit of money, but again, the purpose of that truck, number one, you want it to be roadworthy, DOT-wise, but number two is, what's the function of it? It has to pump efficiently, and right now, it's not. It could fail, and it's already leaking, and we've had a huge amount of repairs with it.
So if you respond to a fire, you've got the rescue pumper and the regular newer tanker for 3,500 gallons altogether. That's insufficient to fight fires. In other words, you need this 4,000 gallons.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, redundancy, so that you're not putting everybody on one line and one pump. So
Yeah.
if something fails, you have redundancy
Right.
to be able to back it up.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else questions for the chief?
Sorry, I sort of beat around the bush there.
He didn't have his glasses.
That's it. That's it. Nail on the head.
All right, thanks, Ken.
Expect your talent to be fighting fires.
Any questions for this Mike?
Yeah, can we talk about the roadway paving?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about that roadway paving.
Favorite topic.
I love it too.
There he
So,
is.
I know that, what roads are we gonna pave with the 360?
Well, we have our pavement study. We're nailing down which ones. I know there are streets on the top of the list, but also we have to take into consideration the traffic on the road. So, I'm working with Mr. Wojcik, and we're going to come up with a definitive plan, but you folks will know shortly what, if this does pass, what we're going to do.
Need to know if you get the pennies first.
So are you guys going, this is going to be on a warrant, right?
Yep.
The capital warrant, and I'm suggesting that we predetermine which roads we're going to pave with the money. The one thing that I didn't see here was there's a factor called an NPR, I guess, which is basically your amount of usage and frequency of use. In other words, this is kind of a risk assessment, which I found really decent. I read through it. It gives the listing, the streets by alphabetical, and then streets by their
Yeah, condition,
total...
road condition.
Yeah, road condition. But it doesn't take into factor the NPR, they call it. In other words, the NPR is missing off this table that we got.
Okay.
So if you multiply the road condition by the NPR, you're going to come up with a factor that will give you kind of it's a risk assessment. You'll basically, the highest scoring ones will be the ones that you pretty much should be paving because they're the ones that get traveled the most or whatever. So I'm wondering, can we get the NPR rating on this, or can you guys give us that, and at least when you do the warrant, or you put together the warrant, that people are understanding which roads are going to be paved for that money? Is that possible?
I think it's possible, yeah.
How many miles of road are you gonna be able to pay for that?
Well, you know, the average, you could, back when things were less expensive, the fuel cost now is what drives asphalt prices. So we haven't paved the road in 3 or 4 years now. So the asphalt prices drive the cost of the paving. When I did the section of Southwest Main Street from Main Street to Wallem Lake Road, that was almost $400,000. So, you know, that's a little over a mile of road.
And I
You
just
know-
don't want people to think, oh, they get 360, they're gonna pave every road.
Yeah, no,
That's why I think letting them know
Yeah.
what's going to be done. Well, it's 700, isn't it? Or 360 from the capital
Your
plus the
360 is
chapter
going to
90?
match the 360 from the state. When I put in the capital request, I was actually very specific. There's a stretch of South Street from, I want to say it's Arch to Hemlock. The pavement rating is a 9 out of a possible 100. But our traffic count on South Street is 2,800 a day. So there's a lot of traffic. Interestingly enough, the traffic is much higher at the Old Common than it is at the state line. So that's telling you is that people using South Street are Douglas residents. So with the money that was left over after the South Street was the focus, looking at the worst pavement condition, the highest level of traffic, and frankly, the most damage that the road has done to the town vehicle, the second road was Northwest Main. Because Northwest Main has taken a beating. So I think its rating is also either a 9 or maybe it's an 11. But the frost heat this year, you know, completely disabled at least one of John's trucks during the plow season. And the traffic count is lower than 2,800, it's more like 1,000, but it's still substantial. And we want to be very specific, so that's what we're trying to do, is target the roads.
And so that can get on the warrant, right, with the capital? It'll say what you're going to do so people know what they're voting on?
If I could interrupt for a second. One thing that's very important to understand is that in that study that you're referring to,
Yeah.
we're less than, by matching the Chapter 90 fund, we're less than 50% of the recommended amount that should be spent over the next 20 years.
Oh, I totally get it. I read through it. Yeah.
We're not going to flip the switch and have clean.
No, absolutely.
So,
and
I mean, I think that's, but it's level setting for the town warrant so people understand we are focusing at the priority of what roads are being paved. I think that is critical to everything. I just would have thought that would have been a little bit higher on the, but again,
We got funded.
Well,
Yes.
that's magic wand, with
Yes.
money will do it.
so,
Once you get funded, it doesn't matter if you're
Yes.
number 1 or number 2.
it was a struggle to get it funded to start with what we had
I
to work with.
totally-
So what was asked for and what we
Yep.
ended up with, it was a struggle.
Do you think you'll have to do some repairs, any of that, before you put it down?
Well, on South Street, there's going to be some drainage work that's going to have to be done. You know, on Northwest Main, the first section from Oak Street to Ridge Trail, we did change a couple culverts last year in anticipation of this happening. You know,
I think they're both full reclaims, though.
they are, absolutely. And a binder and a top coat.
So John, assuming the are hoping that the town meeting approves the capital request between the roadway paving and then the senior center, the social center. What kind of time frame are we talking about, I think, assuming
Well-
normal weather and so on?
I'm hoping to get it in before the end of this season, but, everyone right now is out to bid with their roadway work because the season is right here, and our goal is to get it done before the snow flies.
And can we do it with our own guys, or do we need?
No, that'll be subcontracted out, the whole job.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. We may do some of the work as far as for the Conservation Commission, putting up sock wattles and prep work and what have you to save as much money as we can. But the actual reclaiming, grading, paving, and some of the drainage work, some of it will be subbed out.
Matt, when does Chapter 90 money get into our town checking account, so to speak?
Well, I'll have to ask Gene. It's once a year, and it's usually July.
Okay.
We get notice before July.
Yeah.
We
Mr.
can
Chairman,
start
if I-
working before July, okay?
No, we can, if town meeting passes, then we
if we don't have the
can.
money, we can't let anything happen.
Well, Chapter 90 is a reimbursable grant,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
but we can't, John's correct, this will get passed in May, we wouldn't be able to spend it to July 1st.
Got it, okay.
It's on the annual.
Once we know it's passed, I assume we can put it out to bid, what have you,
Yes.
starting after July 1.
So, Mr. Chairman, just one other thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that with all of the work that we're doing for water and sewer, those projects are requiring curb-to-curb paving to close those roads up. So as a consequence of those developments,
Thanks, goodbye.
Courtney's trading stock on the Hong Kong exchange while she's
It's that Bitcoin.
listening in on this.
Yeah.
It's the Bitcoin. She's a Bitcoin maven. The Gilboa Street, from the town line all the way back to the North Street Bridge, North Street over the bridge and up to what some people call Northeast Main or Maine, and then Northeast Main all the way to the Uxbridge line will all be dug up for pipe. Now, the thing that's going to be a little bit different, people need to manage their expectations accordingly, is that you put the pipe in and you patch it with a trench patch, and it will sit for a year to cure, and then the following year you pave it all. Do I have that right? Okay. That's my highway quiz.
Yep. So we're going to
That's
get
miles and miles of road. That's
quite a bit of roads paved after the water job is done, sewer job is done.
Gotcha, yeah.
But people have to be patient. Unfortunately, there's going to be a 2-foot trench in the road, which isn't the most pleasant thing for 1 year, but just think of the long term, having those roads done.
If you cover it too fast and you don't let that settle, you'll have a terrible road. You'll waste it all that money.
Right. Any other questions for either Matt or John or Mike number 1? Okay, Lynn, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to know what, for the building department, the vehicle that needs to be purchased, is that like a plow truck or what?
That's for the building official, the town building official. That has nothing to do with the highway or, it's an inspection vehicle to do his site inspections. He's currently using his private sedan, and it doesn't work well on the off-roading.
Howard?
So just a couple of quick ones to close my part out. Where are we with the construction of a new highway department building? Is that in capital or is that a separate event?
Well, it's not in capital, it's on the list in capital. So we just completed a needs assessment feasibility committee, study committee, or whatever, it's a big long term that they gave it. Got a little confusing. But anyways, we just went through that process with police, fire, and highway, and we just received, and we just finalized that, and there's a complete report that's actually coming up to the next selectmen's meeting to get presented to them, and then they'll turn around and decide where they're going to send it to next.
Will that eventually show up in the capital budgeting?
It will. We have it on our list of capital things, but the dollar amounts, it hasn't been scoped out Is it 1 building, 3 buildings, 2 buildings? We don't know what that answer is as of yet, so it's a little premature to get to that point.
Are we a year or 2 or 3 away from that making it onto this list?
Hopefully, it's within the next couple of years it gets onto the list, yes.
Okay, all right. And then my last question, what didn't make the cut? What was the last keynote?
What projects didn't make the
Yeah,
cut?
what was?
I couldn't list them all off the top of my head. There's quite a few.
I just didn't know if anything was close.
Something that was needed that didn't make the cut was the truck for the highway department. We just ran out of funds, and as a committee, it didn't make the list.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Gene?
Howard, you should have a list when we disperse the warrant, and that should be at your April 4th meeting.
Okay.
So they'll have the capital projects that were funded, and then you'll have the list of the things that weren't funded this year, and they'll be in the 5-year schedule.
Okay, thank you, Gene.
Anyone else questions for either our town administrator or our highway chief? All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
How about for Mike number 1, any questions from the Capitol?
I'm done?
There you go. Right.
Well, hang on a minute, Mike. Gene, can you comment on the amount of free cash versus the amount Capitol is asking for, and should we notice anything?
The amount I have for free cash is $2,696,254.05, and Mike, you'll have to tell me the number. I don't have it.
$1,260,048. Plus,
Can you say that
well,
again?
the $50 for the vehicle
Yeah, that
will be
doesn't-
raised and appropriated, so that's not out of our free cash of this year. That's certified.
So we're good with that,
What'd you
Gene?
get for number?
Yeah, it's
What,
sufficient.
my number?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's in?
Which number do you?
What was your numbers again? I'm sorry. You
1260048. 1260048.
Okay, yeah, and that's where the 50's coming from. I
The
get
50's added on top of that.
that they're going to get from appropriation of permit.
Future permit fees. Yes.
50,000.
50K permit fee.
That's going to leave about $1,436,206.
What was that, Gene?
0.36 million in free cash available after this.
You need to appropriate.
It was easier the first time.
What was
Yeah,
left of
50.
Free cash, just the 1.436 million is left in free cash after the capital.
Correct.
Matt, where are you? Oh, go ahead, Gene.
I do want to remind you that we will have use of that free cash at the special for snow and ice. I'm not pinning John down because I don't want to curse anything. I'll ask him by the end of the week, but we will be utilizing free cash for other things.
So Matt, question for you. So at the Capital Committee, we talked in very general ways about setting up a stabilization fund as a rainy day fund for heavy equipment, that kind of thing. But as Mike said, it's all very premature at this point. But Matt, can you just briefly speak to that in your experience? How have towns been successful in setting up long-term piggy banks for things like plows and police cruisers and so on?
I'll have to find you a case study. I think
If that's on the mind of the Capitol,
somebody came up,
start doing that.
wasn't it you? Was it Drake that has done it?
Yeah, Drake had just did it for, in 2020, June 30th, 2020, they did a special stabilization fund for their school projects, for repairing walls and things like that. So just a brief outline, the November 7th, 2016, the legislature passed that you could have multiple stabilization accounts, and you can set up a special stabilization account and specifically label it for something, say it's a fire truck. And it still takes 2/3 votes to change. It can take 2/3 votes to change the designation of that money. So it doesn't get locked into it. There's always a control mechanism in there. But again, this was premature, but since you asked the question, I'm going to answer it. As the chief said, that these trucks last about 20 years. And the goal, through multiple conversations with the town administrator, is to get it onto a 5-year rotation plan for these trucks. They have basically 4 trucks, so they just changed one in 17. Here we are 5 years later. Hopefully, we can somehow or another reach the 5-year point going forward. I don't know when we can put this proposal onto the town warrant, if it can be done, it has to be done at the annual, or if you can do it as a special. I would like to get it on sooner than later. Long-term, the goal would be to put $100,000 a year out of free cash into that, so every 5 years you would have $500,000. So then when if there's a $750,000 truck that comes, you get $250 to put. It's a no-brainer. On the onset, because of all his trucks backing up so quickly, this was just on my own thinking maybe you would want to do like 125 in there, or maybe 150, just to get that kitty built up quicker, to try to make that leap to the next truck. If you look at the capital request, I have them right here, that this year, next year, and the following year, there's a truck on there. What I get to work with on capital, there's just not enough in there to satisfy everything, and if you keep pushing everything else off, sooner or later, you're going to have a major problem. So we have to come up with some sort of strategy to try to correct this, and this is a long-term thing, and once you set it up, I would think that you would want to keep it in place, because this is never going to go away. Every 5 years, you're going to be needing another truck that's 20 years old.
So, Mr. Chairman, that reflects a financial best practice.
Yeah.
Okay, so the case study that we can show people, there are 2 really important things to show people. One is, what is the cost of a project if you save in advance and you gather interest, even if it's, just a paltry rate of interest that we would get now. But let's say a couple of years from now, we put money in an account and it's a longer-term saving, so the treasurer is able to do whatever magic she's able to do. Let's say she gets 5% money. Well, if the 5% is accruing back to the account, that's money the taxpayer doesn't have to take out of free cash at the capital process. It may be only $40,000 or $50,000, but you save that. You could buy it cash like we're doing right now. What do you save when you buy it cash? You save the interest you would pay if you borrowed. So, having been a TA before in a town that used borrowing as a strategy, because that was what they thought they needed to do, they would make all these installment payments every year. Look, we bought all this stuff, but we have minimized the payments. And then we asked the question of the town treasurer one night, so what is the annual cost and interest? It's $56,000. So the town was just bleeding this money back. You get absolutely nothing for the taxpayer. You're just paying the bank for the use of their money. It's no value added whatsoever. It's horrible. So those are the 3 different tranches. The other thing you have to do when you borrow money is make absolutely sure, if you are going to borrow, that you only borrow for the things that have the useful life that matches the life of the borrowing. So I had this ridiculous conversation in my hometown where we built a $98 million school, and they used the money from the borrowing to buy the furniture and a whole bunch of other stuff that went into those school buildings that is useful life somewhere between 5 to 10 years. And we are going to pay for 30 years for stuff we will replace twice before we finish paying the note. That's financial mismanagement to the nines. It's horrible. And yet, it is done almost everywhere. But, so, we won't do that ever. So if we have to borrow to build a highway bond, we're not going to start, buying the fire extinguishers and the refrigerator for the break room out of the proceeds of the bond. It's just foolishness.
So one of the things we talked about as a finance committee is how do we start saving for a rainy day? What's the way to do that? And it seems, I think us on the capital committee, Mike, that stabilization fund specifically for big equipment would be one route to look at.
Yeah, multiple. And I've
The wording is the key.
And I've disagreed with that term with multiple people.
Yeah.
If you set this up for, the fire trucks just don't go away. And they keep popping up every 5 years, and it destroys the capital budget. So you have to, instead of just reacting to it every 5 years, come up with a solution to correct it. If you disrupt that and you buy anything other than what you intended to do, you're back to square one again.
Yep.
Until you come up with a way to not have fires or a better way of fighting them, you need to put something in place that's going to correct this. Then we won't be faced with trying to decide whether or not we need to replace a 1999 fire truck or a 2001 plow truck.
Right.
They're both needed. They're both important in their own job. So you can't justify one over the other, but you're faced with this problem. So we need to come up with a solution to correct it. And through multiple conversations with the town administrator as well as the finance director, I kind of pointed in a direction, and I searched around, and I found that thing on there. That's why I know the dates off the top of my head.
So stay tuned, everybody.
You know,
Well, I think it's a good thought process, and if we can figure it out, it'll help the town for a long term.
I have a question for Matt. Isn't there's only a certain percentage, though, that we're allowed to put into a stabilization fund, isn't it? Or it used to be.
No, you're not capped. You're not capped on what you put aside, especially if you're where we are. I mean, we have fairly respectable balances in both free cash and stabilization, but nowhere near what Wall Street would favor for like a AAA bond rating. The only thing I'm aware of that the Division of Local Services frowns upon is if a town carries so much free cash that they should be able to see to their own needs without applying for grants. I know of at least one, actually 2 towns that have been told they will not be successful in competitive grants because they should be spending their free cash to buy them. We're not there.
Judging by my capital budget, I'll be there for a while.
We're about 17 times away from where we would have to be if that's a problem.
Okay, any other questions for Mike relative to the capital list? Or for our town administrator? On capital? Or for Gene? All right, thank you.
You sure?
Yeah.
I'm deferring to the group.
You did this once too.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. And thank everybody for coming if you're interested in the capital budget. Mike number 2. Dr. Fitzpatrick, welcome.
I will make sure that he maintains like that.
Good evening and good health to all. This is my 29th year before you, and they tallied that I've made some 800 budget presentations, but this is the first time in my career I've ever followed Mike Fitzpatrick.
You should be proud.
We're flipping.
How long did you practice that line?
That's a quick one.
40 minutes.
Before tonight, at the request of Jeannie, I provided placeholders, as they generally do, and I'm certain that you and they have watched the various printouts from the state. I did prepare a summary sheet that I thought might be helpful for tonight, so give me this.
We can share.
Nice, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do you want to start with this then?
I thought that might be helpful.
Okay.
Do I need to introduce myself in any way?
Probably.
Okay. I'm Dr. Michael Fitzpatrick. I serve as Douglas's vocational technical superintendent, and have done so for the past 28 years. The summary sheet indicates that our assessment request, and we have a a particularly attractive request because it's less than 1%. So the request is an increase of $3,129 new dollars versus the assessment of a previous year. There are 4 fewer students in the count, okay, bringing the population of Douglas at its vocational school to 118 students. The per pupil assessment without debt is the amount listed in the summary sheet, $13,089 for each of the 118 students. And the debt is in the 17th year of the previously approved 20-year debt cycle, refinanced after 10 years. And so we're winding down that debt, which is always helpful. Now, we did several things, the Budget Subcommittee. Oh, I should first of all mention that I'm joined in the audience by fairly newly elected school committee member from Douglas, Mark Potter. Okay?
Good evening. Thank you.
Mark,
You want to come up here, Mark? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
Mark has been a steady contributor. That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
There's 13 members on the board. Mr. Potter has been a regular participant and a contributor at each of the school committee meetings since he joined us and was elected.
And you've been on that for how long?
Just about a year now.
Okay. You're doing okay?
Yeah, liking it. Glad to be back at the school.
Did you go to school there?
I did. I have 2 kids that are going there as well.
One of the advantages of Mark is he's a tradesperson, so he enables us to add that skill set and recommendations in the conversations. So how were we able to make a request of $3,129 new dollars? We did that through several strategies. The first is, once again, we applied our so-called free cash account, which we refer to as excess and deficiency, in the amount of $225,000. So the $225,000 allowed us to offset the assessments. Then the next item listed here, there were several years ago, one or more members of this particular body recommended to me that we apply any surplus received from regional transportation. The year that was recommended, the state looked at that, but they actually never created an additional resource or excess, so it never materialized. But this time it did, okay? We did receive a so-called windfall or greater reimbursement from the regional transportation account, known as Chapter 71, than we anticipated. And it was a high water mark of 96%, which is very surprising. One of the reasons that we were able to achieve that is we played by all the rules recommended by the state during the COVID experience, continuing to work with our transportation provider, and I'll mention later that we've also just recently contracted with that transportation provider for the next 5-year cycle. So we were able to offset the assessments by another $210,000. Once again, we've been particularly successful in securing grants that are consistent with our mission, not just money to brag about, but things that add resources and dovetail or connect with the vocational technical trades, allowing us to upgrade training tools and resources, but not ask the towns to fund it. We recently had a fairly new superintendent visit our school and refer to the school as a shiny new building. Well, it's a far cry from a shiny new building. The school was built when Dwight Eisenhower was president, but in any case, we do take care of the building, and we invite anyone, and some of you have visited, and we invite others to do that. Shoot.
So Dr. Fitzpatrick, the new grants, are there new grants, or were you just better at getting grants that were in existence?
A combination.
Okay. And what kind of new grants are out there now that didn't used to be? I mean, why are there new grants, I guess?
One of the reasons is the nature of the federal government and state government creating new stimulus categories.
I see, okay.
Which are generally one-time, not renewables. But that's particularly appealing for equipment.
Okay.
We don't use it for staff.
Are there some recurring grants that you're able to get pretty
Absolutely.
regularly?
Yes, yeah. An example of that would be the federal Perkins money. It's usually designated for vocational technical schools across the nations. We pursue that, and we're probably getting $140,000 to $180,000 a year under that category, depending on what's appropriated. They are competitive.
Okay. All right, carry on.
Certainly. One of the things we take credit for is the fact that our own students and staff, because of the cooperative relationship that exists, have worked to protect the building, protect the facility, to maximize its appeal and its durability. So another example of, I guess, alternative resource acquisition is we recently entered into a partnership with 15 solar farms. It's an 11% discount in insurance, but we look, like you, think of every dollar counting, and so we're eager to have that be productive. And industry continues to offer us donations, which is helpful, and they look to us to do that. In advance of the meeting, we sent copies, or I think Mark helped deliver these, okay, of the budget books. The budget books are printed by our students, and sometimes our graphic arts and multimedia students contribute to the artistic design. So I'll flip through the book if I may, and address any detail that you feel is useful. The Budget Subcommittee met over pretty much a 8 to 10 month period and posted public sessions with presentations made by a wide variety of groups. One of the advantages we have in building a budget is we have some 350 program advisory committee members. These are tradespeople broken out by different trades who have examined the requests made by each department, and they've validated and rated the interest and need that was identified. So they further add kind of a validation process and a rationale for why things should be advanced with the budgetary process. As you notice from the Budget Subcommittee, it's a combination of school committee members, the treasurer, and administrative staff members. The next document is my standard letter of summary, and it references the fact that during this year we provided you with the 28th annual report, kind of a prospectus. It was the return on investment of the previous dollars given to us. Again, this is printed by our students, but we've always felt it's appropriate to give you information as to how we use the dollars that you gave us. So it's produced in-house.
So I have another question.
Sure.
Mark, I'll ask you, and that is, over time, the numbers of kids that go from the various towns to Valley Tech kind of go up and down. Mm-hmm. Why would they go up and down from year to year, you think? For instance,
Based on,
is it just pure demographics? Is it?
I think it's based on the
issues?
current industry, is what I would say.
Do you?
Population of each class, it's coming up through the ranks. Slow times, parents may not be pushing vocational education if there's recession going on. When times are good, it may increase.
So you think it sort of reflects what's going on in society economically?
I think so.
Do you?
Yeah, that would be my judgment as a parent.
Okay.
What's available out there to do in the trades, and the school has certainly changed since I graduated in '95. There's a lot of new shops and new technologies that are in there that weren't an option when I was there. And I think they've done great. I think the nursing program, the engineering program, those have been very popular and attractive to parents and kids.
What was your shop?
An electrician. Electrical.
One of the other factors that drives the enrollment, of course, is the number of students that reside in the sending school system. Some of the school systems have declining enrollment, others do not, okay? So that's a factor for consideration. There's fewer students to be recruited or to consider the option of going either to the local high school or their other high school, which is us. It's a numbers game in that regard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make budgeting harder?
Yes.
In terms of predicting enrollments and so on?
Absolutely. See, unfortunately, what the state of Massachusetts has what I call a rearview mirror approach. It takes a look at the number of students you have on October 1, and Douglas has 118. And, Howard knows this well. But you're planning the next year's budget. You don't know how many students are going to be in the year that'll be funded by the budget that's before you. So it's a little bit of a delay game situation, and it doesn't adjust itself to the next year, the year following. Okay. But the benefit of that is at least the October 1 count is a known number. It's not there's enough forecasting that you have to do in this process. That's at least is a known. So.
Okay, thank you. You want to carry on?
Sure. The next page is the budget building process. The idea there was to highlight to anyone who might examine what we do, how many rungs on the ladder, if you will, how many different entities examine our budget before it's advanced to you, now goes before you. At this juncture, I presented to 4 Finance Committee meetings, and others are scheduled. Okay, so, and I'll give you some of the basic numbers and anything you might need. The green sheet is generally considered a revenue prediction sheet. The good news is for us, many school systems receive the mere $30 per student allocation for their base Chapter 78, which is less than sensitive to their inflationary needs. The inflationary numbers at both the federal and state level are, not much less than 5%, 4.9, 4.7 range. So to ask school systems to operate with a mere $30 per student from the state aid puts a far greater burden on the local assessments. For us, the state reclassified many of our students based on the data that we submitted to them. And you can see on the top of the sheet, instead of $30 a student, the governor's plan currently has designated $336,173 for base aid. Now, under the hold harmless provision, that number should not be reduced in subsequent years. So you should expect to continue to receive that even after I've retired. So, okay. You see some of the basic numbers are listed here. The total spending we're asking permission to have is a 4.9, which is closer to that inflationary number, so that we can meet all the obligations that we have. But we're able to do that, and by asking Douglas for the $3,129 additional dollars. Okay, so before 1993, the dollars per community of the 13 towns that joined the partnership some 60 years ago were based upon, if you had 10% of the enrollment, you had 10% of the cost. But that has changed, okay? That has significantly changed, and it will continue to change the way the state does its calculation. Right? Life was easier if you had 10%, you paid 10%. But that's not the case anymore. The backside of the green revenue sheet references the fact that we would like to be transparent about the ability to spend up to $650,000 on improvements to our campus. I certainly witnessed the conversation you just had relative to planning for how to address alternatives. The Department of Revenue has certified the excess and deficiency amount. This is actually one of the questions I traditionally get from Howard, but that's why I came with this answer. Okay, the E&D was certified at $978,907. So less than $1 million, $978,907. That is $400,000 under what we can have in our reserve. So it's kind of like just where you want to be honest with you. So we would, and that's how we continue to draw, like the $225,000 I mentioned earlier, to offset assessments, and continue to do that. Are there any questions on the green revenue sheet? Hearing none. Moving on. The next sheet is the town-by-town breakout, okay, relative to each community's ownership. And you can see Douglas has a 9.4% ownership, which is really close to the debt factor that it currently pays too. So you get kind of a nice balance between the mortgage and the occupancy factors relative to that. I try to be upfront about there are 4 fewer students in this particular count. So there's a slight reduction, and that may continue based on some of the numbers we see in the sending school. Slight numbers, okay?
How is the enrollment now historically? Is it high, low, normal? Not from Douglas, but school-wide.
Oh, it's at capacity.
Is it?
Okay, yeah. We actually increased by 5 or 6 students every year, so we do not have a declining enrollment overall. All right. I did ask the towns to consider expanding several years ago, and 7 towns were supportive of that expansion, 5 were not. And so we respected the decision by the towns, because when you're asking to expand, you really want to open the doors to all the towns and all the students, not have it, be exclusionary in any way because the town wasn't supportive of a debt. That was a $2.9 million expansion, so it was very modest. Nevertheless, it was not successful. Okay.
Expanding?
To take in more students. Our classroom.
With the same towns, just...
Oh, that's correct. not adding a town, adding to the square footage of the campus.
Okay.
The current campus is roughly 300,000 square feet. Although I proudly mentioned to you that we have 150 students on cooperative education. So every other week, the students are going to industry, 150 of them, which is a high water mark for the school. So,
Anybody else at this point, questions? All right, you carry on?
Oh, sure. So the numbers here, when I initially gave a placeholder to Jeannie, I indicated to her that I would expect that the total new assessment would be less than $10,000. Obviously, you now know that's less than $5,000. Okay, so we were able to beat that slightly. Right? So none of the numbers here should be new to that which has been provided in advance. And of course, the debt number is, was already predetermined, okay? If you turn the page to the blue, that is the debt affiliation. Debt is somewhat different than the operational parts. According to the regional agreement, it's fairly common that debt is structured as far as the portion that a given community has to pay on the basis of the time in which you entered the debt. So there's a 3-year average of enrollment at the time in which the debt, and though that's, but as you can see here, Douglas, at the time the debt was entered, some 17 years ago, had 9.1%, and still maintains, something very close to that relative to the occupancy today.
When the 20-year note is done, are you hoping to start a new note for new debt or not?
In my cover letter, I do reference the fact that to alert the communities that we have self-funded 4 of the roof projects because the magnitude of the project, we were able to do that. So in other words, instead of borrowing money, we appropriated the money, and we filed with the Mass School Building. They gave us 53.53% reimbursement, and then we moved on to the next cycle. There's one more section of the roof that's too expensive for us to do that. So I am alerting the communities that we would ask, they can anticipate, we'll ask for a debt. And we will apply to the Mass School Building Authority as we have in the past. But this time, we'll have to do it with permission for the towns to enter into that debt. So
will you wait till that other note is done or start it like next year? You got 3 years left on that.
Yes,
right?
yeah. I would suggest that we advance something next year to be slightly ahead, but mostly to protect the roof.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so, okay. Did that answer that question?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, of course, okay. So that apportionment would be based a little differently than this, okay? That's a whole new structure.
Yeah.
Okay. The next few pages summarize the so-called line item budget or line item series budget in each category. Let me mention some of the most significant ingredients that came into play here and the kind of questions that have been raised in the past. First of all, as mentioned, we've entered into a new 5-year contract for bus transportation. That's a healthy expense to us. The new bus contract is a 5.6% increase, and it's a 5-year plan. Having conversations with colleagues across the state, especially in the rural areas, such as the ones that our buses travel, some of the increases are over 10%. So we felt that was reasonable. We did approach the bus company who won the bid. There were 3 different bus companies that looked at it, met with us through the budget, the bidding information process, but in the end, only one ended up bidding, which is not uncommon in the bus company business. All right. But in any case, we approached the successful bidder and asked them to reconsider the rates they were charging for some of the extracurricular sports activities, things like that, and they agreed to modify. They did reduce that request, which was, they didn't have to do that, but we're glad they did. Another category is the health benefits. The health benefits is now a single provider. Harvard Pilgrim has done some reorganizations on that line. The health benefits are at a 5.3% increase. The school committee previously negotiated a 75-25 cost. When I arrived at the school, it was 90-10. Another category is collective bargaining. The raises for teachers, so to speak. The first year was last year. It was 1.5%. The current year, which is this year, which we previously funded, is 2.1%. And in this budget is a salary increase of 2.4%. Those things are already negotiated, and again, they allowed me to insert them as knowns, not estimates. Okay.
Can you go back to the health insurance piece?
Yes.
From what I remember in previous years, your school has a very benefit-rich plan by comparison to other school systems. Do you know what the deductible is on your plan?
No, I didn't bring the details of the plan.
Okay.
But the,
And you've never looked into self-funded plans?
oh, yes, we've looked at multiple alternatives, okay? The school committee who negotiate this, it's a topic of collective bargaining, have been encouraged to watch the harmony, the avoidance of legal challenges, and the level of cooperation that we have from staff, all contributing to the professional relationships.
75-25, so
That's correct.
the employee is paying 25% of the premium?
That's correct.
The school's paying 75%.
Yeah, the school committee negotiated a change that started at 90-10 and have worked their way to a 75-25. Okay, the teachers and school committee will negotiate a newest contract this year. Okay, to be, I would anticipate this year, because two sides have to come together. And so they look at the give and take of the process. The teachers have given a modest contribution to OPEB, kind of thing, so that the school committee wants them to be aware of those types of costs and expenses. It's $5, it's not major money, but other school systems have already followed that example. And so there's a lot of factors that are built in what we do. I can tell you that in some of the vocational technical schools, the technical staff are hesitant to do work in the building. They said, I was hired to teach. I wasn't hired to improve or, make, we don't have that. So people give in all kinds of different ways because of the total relationship that's been established. There actually have been no grievances this year. Again, just an example, okay, of things that we would count to be meaningful and important. So,
Did that answer your question, Wynn? Okay. Anybody else at this point? All right, carry on.
okay. As far as the change in FTE, full-time equivalent of staff, there's little pieces of people, special education aides and others that are little modifications, but in the final tally, there's really one new position, and it's another plumbing instructor. The plumbing program has grown to, I think, 66 students now, roughly that number, okay, and so there's a need for an additional instructor in plumbing. And so we're glad to see. In fact, we're witnessing a significant increase in the so-called T&I, trade and industrial programs, which I think is consistent with what Mark said, shared with you, okay, which is good. And that's because the industry has improved the competitiveness of recruiting. They continue to subsidize college tuitions and other kinds of things to recruit students. And the hourly wages and other benefits have become far more competitive than they were previously.
Yeah, that's for sure.
One of the, I was supposed to do this. By the way, on the summary sheet, I have to point out that the picture here is one of the projects that the electrical department did. Apparently, the Park and Rec department in Douglas approached the electrical department to totally re-engineer, if you will, the pitching machine. So that's what that is. That was one of the projects that was done to help the town. Okay, and there's lots of little examples of ways of giving back, and our teachers and students include these things in their portfolio and their pride of community. So the return on investment is this sheet here. It attempts to highlight some of the achievement. If a Voc-Tech school has a student who is successful earning a gold award for Skills USA at the national level, it's pretty remarkable. Douglas's Voc-Tech school had 8 students who won at the national level. The level of achievement and accomplishments is, stellar, okay? We have the highest MCAS scores in the area on the basis of improvement from we continue to reduce any emphasis of academics in the entrance factors, but nevertheless, it hasn't, the MCAS and other factors have not suffered or reduced. We continue to have 100% completion rate and a 0 dropout rate. You can have some students who transfer occasionally. One of the points I've attempted to promote is that if you look at this sheet here, It lists some 15 or 16 different categories that are in our budget. We make a one-time, single, consolidated request of you, and do not come back, okay? We have no ability to transfer certain expenses to the town side, because we belong to 13 towns, all right? And so that's one of the reasons that has to be able to be funded and addressed through our budgetary request. We're confident that this budget request does that, even with the amount of money we've asked you. There's a little summary sheet on per pupil investment. Douglas is the 6th lowest of the, right in the middle, if you will, of the 13 towns on a per pupil assessment level. And I was asked, the young lady who is highlighted here, she's putting decals on the vans that are from the donated credit unions and banks that we use for gas and for road fuel and maintenance. And those vehicles are then used to transport students throughout the district to do projects and others. This is a young lady who's from Douglas, so I was asked to do that. I wasn't given any names, but it's okay. I'll mention it.
So Mike, is there one of the sheets that shows the cost to our town last year versus this year? Because you said it was like a 1.1% increase or something.
Yeah, I'll give you the numbers if I can.
Is that in here somewhere?
Pink sheet?
I know this is for all the towns, your booklet, but
That's just
No,
23.
you wouldn't have, it's all focused on the new budget.
Okay.
Okay? Comparison information needs to be presented in a different form.
Yeah.
Okay?
So is this the 1.1% over this?
In other words, may I use the numbers?
Sure.
The $1,581,634, which is the total new request.
Gotcha.
It is 3,129 higher than the previous year,
Yeah.
which was 1,578,505.
Okay. So that's a 1.1%.
No, not at all.
No, actually,
Not even one.
it's a 0.002.
Yeah, it's very small.
Okay, I misheard you then, okay.
No, I said less than one.
Less than 1%,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So we're
They're
on the-
raising $3,129
Right. Gotcha.
for the year, because their expenses have gone up, but we got four less students,
4 fewer
right?
kids, right?
Yeah.
Right.
What's it?
4 fewer kids, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that didn't drive your assessment.
Yeah,
I kept that number looking artificially the same.
Well, okay, I'll give you an example. Just saying, the way the state does the numbers, if it were totally driven by student count, it would be far more impactful than it is. Okay, I can give you examples of that. Okay? For example, a year ago, when the state did the calculation, there were 2 additional students. The assessment went up 152,000. There's no, you could say rhyme or reason. It's just not driven by the student kind of thing,
Yeah.
all right?
Yeah.
All right?
I would say I like the taste of the stew, but I'm not really sure the recipe, you know? That's what I see so far this year. But good stuff, $3,129, can't complain about that.
Actually, we just did the gourmet dinner, speaking of stews, 2 weeks ago to raise additional money.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
the students worked that part.
No, I've been there at other schools, but I'm sure.
It was a
I
lovely
guess
event. I attended. My daughter's a senior in culinary, so.
Right.
we didn't get any invites.
You know, it's invites.
Yep, there's-
Oh, I
You gotta
thought there there's no,
Next meeting.
there should be a card or something they send you. That's what I get from other schools.
That's like an incentive, not a bribe, I know.
All right, we're going to keep going. Any questions? Anything else, Mike, for us?
Well, all I'm saying is the grant list is here. That's a snapshot of the grants prior to this night, okay? We have several that are worked on even today. And then the last page is some of the achievements and recognitions, okay, of the activity.
Nice.
So we had a phenomenal year. The students just did incredible work, and we're quite proud of them. So,
Can I ask an admission question?
yes, go ahead.
If someone doesn't get in as a freshman, they can apply as a sophomore.
That's correct. That is right.
Is it the same criteria to come in as a sophomore? Like there's only so many spots, or is it people had to leave to vacate? Like, how do you get in as a sophomore, I guess?
Well, there needs to be an empty seat. Okay. The challenge we have, kind of thing, we've watched the population grow from 660 students to 800 to 900 applying to get in. Okay, so it's just an incredible pendulum swing. I'm sorry to say no to any student, by the way, let me point that out. The student who's not successful can make subsequent application in the 10th grade, and sometimes even beyond that. But you pretty much are looking for a vacancy in a given program. All right? Between the ratios between the state for safety and the guidelines and standards, the negotiated ratios of teaching, safety, and so many other factors, you can't put 40 or 50 kids with one teacher in a machine shop. There's things like that demand that you have to protect everybody and live within the standards. Also, the state places a higher expectation on a VOTEC school. They give us more money, and it's okay that they do that. So they regularly visit. And so we're glad to have them. Okay, they come in, inspect, make recommendations, and if they have an improvement, we'll gladly address it. So you do have, let's say, program-specific vacancies in the 10th grade. Is that helpful?
Yeah, just a friend of mine mentioned today that her daughter didn't get in, and I said, you can apply as a sophomore. I said, I don't know anything about it, but I'll ask.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, it's not uncommon to have 40 candidates for the sophomore class.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see what happens in the future. Also, we haven't completed our admissions reviews this year. It's like the first wave. They're still reviewing some of the additional. And additional information is coming in, okay, that wasn't known in the first round. Is that helpful? Okay. I've also given tours to, I don't know, actually thousands, okay? And we continue to do that to anyone who wants to see the school. So you get a chance to see the stew and making.
There you go. Nice.
Any other questions for either Mike or Mark?
I had one, just one quick follow-up. On the pick sheet, there's two towns with very similar enrollment numbers, yet they are vastly different in expenditure for '23. Just characterize that, like what different part of an algorithm are they experiencing versus Douglas?
Yeah, that is the state's calculation of the community's ability to pay, driven by two factors, totally outside of us, okay? First is the real estate value of that community, and then the wage earning reported value to the Mass Department of Revenue by that community. They're arriving at that community's ability to pay, okay, and then making a determination which would create a per pupil assessment significant, let's say different, and which is what you've captured.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
It makes the job harder, by the way.
I know, that's like me, that's like me, charging more for your coffee than his because you make more.
All right. Anybody else? Questions?
That's totally outside.
I get it, it's not your algorithm, I'm sure.
Go ahead, Howard.
Great.
Michael, good afternoon, good evening.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Nice, thank you very much.
That's all right.
No, I have a whole bunch of questions.
Is the three-season restaurant open?
Yes, it
to the
is.
public?
Yes, it is, Karen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was closed during COVID.
You said you're going to hire more in the plumbing department. Is Mr. Steve still there?
Who?
Mr. Josie? Joe the plumber?
Oh, yeah, Joe is still there, sorry. Yeah, Gus and Joe are still there. Yeah.
You're hiring somebody else, another teacher?
That is the plan if the budget is funded. Okay. By the way, 28 years, I've attended the town meeting every year, and I hope to do that again.
Howard has the floor.
So if I may, good evening. Mark, good evening.
Thank you.
So just, some of the usual things you and I cover. I think it was my fault I didn't ask this year a couple weeks in advance, but when you get a chance, can you guys give me placement records for, let's say, the last year or the previous 5 years? So college placements and, jobs out of BBT upon graduation placements. I always like to see that. You and I have debated over the years, we've been with each other on this, different definitions of return on investment, right?
Right. Yeah.
My investment is where they go after, yours is what their test scores were in. I don't really care about their test scores in, I care about where they go.
Yeah, we don't have an assessment score coming in.
No, I'm just looking for placement. So what I mean by that is where the 2021 class went to college or where they went into the trades.
Okay, the only...
I've gotten that from you guys each year.
Yes, and we will provide that. The one consideration I would encourage you is that today, the industry has consistently encouraged the students to consider going to college and entering industry part-time, and then accepting the position after the college experience. So in other words, you don't go to college for a living, but you can further your education and then play. So it's better to look at a 5-year placement as far as where did the students go in the trades after they concluded, or took advantage of some of the incentives and subsidies. I'll give you examples. Southbrook Milton, Waters Corporation, and several others have recently come into the school, met with me and others, and they are recruiting students and offering subsidies for college educations if they'll enter into a partnership with them. So it's not a kind of thing, it never went to industry process. Okay, that's all. I'm just saying it.
No, and I'm excited. In the years you and I have been doing this together, I get what you said earlier and the points you've made about the change, I think, in the last few years of the trades being more needy, offering more, and BBT, what I've always viewed as its traditional role, 60 years, right? 1962, the original charter, and the original time. You acknowledged that in an early meeting, that you recognize the original charter of this was to get kids into the trades, give them the opportunity coming out of 8th grade when they really weren't college-bound kids to head to the trades. We're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes. So I guess I was just trying to understand placement for last year, not necessarily suggesting that more college would somehow maybe be better. I've always viewed it as more trade would be better. That's my perception of what I want BBT to be doing for my town.
One of the changes is the Department of Education that oversees the original mission and today's mission has changed its title. It is now College and Career. Even those who oversee the money that they give us have recognized that the pathways have changed. I mean,
the evolution keeps evolving, Mike. As the economy changes and what the need to put kids into out of our high schools.
Yeah, all I'm saying that the tendency is not to enter into trade to the degree they originally. I mean, I was in Hopedale yesterday. Okay, I went by Draper Mills. There's not even, the only thing left is a few bricks on the ground.
Yeah.
Okay, the manner in which these trades have changed from when I was a kid, I worked in 3 different trades as a kid, is just very different, okay, as far as the so-called success of the investment to place students, to encourage them to go into different career paths, okay? This is an example of a product of our system, okay?
Fantastic.
Okay, and we have lots of those,
Yeah.
all right, but he didn't just graduate.
No,
I caught the 1995. He's young. Yeah.
in some eyes.
Did you,
Right.
so you're an electrician,
Yep,
did you go off to college as well?
did not. No, but I've got 2 other brothers.
That's what I think you're looking
Well,
at.
Out of my 3 brothers, I did not. The 2 others did. One is still in the electrical trade, and one is HVAC technician out in San Diego. So different ways to get there, but we all got there.
My 1980, the 2 schools in my community were clear direction, college or trade. 1995, it was evolving. 2015, it was more college, maybe. And 2022, it's swinging back toward more trade.
Some of the trades that we brought on are more technical, though. The engineering, requires the education.
And that's why I concede, I've always talked here about wanting to see the placement. I said in the Douglas school committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, I'm very excited. In the last couple of years, we've been putting kids into, we had an Ivy League kid this past year. I don't care where they actually go, but I want to see that they have the opportunities, right? So Mark, to your point, right?
Yep.
Now, to your point, you mentioned you've got a couple of kids currently at BBT. Can I ask, were they Douglas kids through 8th grade?
Yes.
Yeah, and so, one of the things, Lynn and I, our boys came through at the same time, and our kids had friends who, it frustrated me to no end that we had kids that really, really wanted to get into the trades, wanted to get into BBT and could not, didn't get accepted. They were trade kids, and they weren't getting in because college-bound kids were going, and those kids then weren't going to the colleges at the end they might have thought they were going to be able to go to, vis-a-vis what was being pushed at 6th and 7th and 8th grade, to you directly as a parent, I asked that question. When your kids were coming through in the last 4 or 5 years, did you see some of that? Their friends that wanted to get into the trade bar and weren't getting in, and other kids were getting in the same classes.
Yes and no. I mean, you would see a handful, but I can only really speak for my kids. I know what my kids have put in to get to there.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Michael, that's always been my issue with the BBT I've got to deal with in front of me is, and so I caught in your comments, right, that the school is, you said, continue to reduce academics in your entrance factors. Can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, actually,
What, the last time we talked about it was probably 2, 3, 4 years ago. So how has that evolved?
We modified the admissions so that the student who indicates in an interview that they're interested in a trade has a better chance of getting in.
Great. I think that's fantastic.
Well, it's what you wanted and what we did.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, I mean, whether it be the transportation offset or other kinds of things, we have heeded some of the recommendations. Of course, we represent 13 towns.
Yeah.
Okay, so it changes, like you said, evolutions, modifications, you know, kind of thing, and we have done that. So, and it's certainly impacted, I think, the way in which the students have chosen the trades once they have been accepted. That's one of the reasons you have 66 kids in plumbing.
Yeah, right.
Well, you might have
That's
had
exciting.
20 before.
Right.
And they're needed.
No, I think.
Yeah, right.
I think they're recognizing the market change. That's all. They're all recognizing the market.
I
That's
think in
101.
my sons went to plumbing.
Yeah.
Okay, and out of the kids he went to school with, I think only he and one other are licensed plumbers. Everybody else did something else. They just took a spot in plumbing and decided not to be a plumber, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I'll tell you.
Trust me, industry knows this. Industry knows that they're missing.
Has his license.
Yeah, does well, I'm
Just
sure.
bought a multifamily, and he's 25, you know, so
Yeah.
that's the thing. You know, it's like college is not for everybody. It definitely wasn't for him.
Your two brothers, did they go to vocational school as well?
They both went to Valley Tech, yes.
They did.
Yeah. The one graduated, I think, number 1, number 2 in the class, and he went to UMass Dartmouth for,
To continue his education.
well, at no cost to him, I believe,
Yeah.
for graduating number 1 in the school.
And that's what you're saying, right? That you can wind up in the trade,
Yeah.
but have the trade help pay for some actual college education as you get back to the trade, educated to run a business, the point you've always made,
Yeah.
right? That you're teaching that as well, which I think is also fantastic.
And that happens. When you're in 8th grade, you don't know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. There's many 30-years that don't know what they're going to do for the rest of their life at this point. So I'm in the same boat. In 95, there's, I don't know, 30 electricians that graduated, and there's probably 10 in the field that are licensed. Maybe more. I don't know the exact numbers, but yeah, it always doesn't turn out the way you want it
Plumbers and
to.
electricians, because you can't get one when you
No.
need one.
Mike, can you talk a little more? You also said there's a significant increase, I think you said, in the technology and industry segments. Is that phrase you guys use? And what is, show me that, walk me through what that is. Is that what we've been talking about? That you're now, are those classes bigger, class sizes bigger? Are you hiring more teachers?
Yeah.
Run, 2 sections instead of 1?
Yeah, there'd be multiple forms of that, okay? As Mark mentions, it would be found in the biotechnology program that just opened, which has a tremendous placement opportunity, as an example. But it also, you'd find it in like the laser equipment that replaces manual equipment, or even, computerized numerical control. We've watched a tremendous transition. In 1993, when I arrived, the school did much of its training through donated property from the federal government, which was surplus, okay? So obviously it wasn't very recent, right? And so it wasn't very expensive, and it contributed to the skills gap. And it trained people on tools that they weren't going to use in industry, and industry couldn't use those tools or machinery in order to compete, worldwide. And so there's been tremendous changes to continue to chase things down. And so that's one of the reasons why I reached out. I asked Douglas to consider giving us some of the stimulus money, that was not approved, but the idea of asking for some of the stimulus money is because the towns and not the school received significant stimulus money. And 11 towns did give us stimulus money, which we then used to acquire new equipment. And so we try hard to ask for a share or a consideration because we're the other school, okay? But we're not based in the town, so it's easy to forget us.
Just a couple questions. Sports fees, you know what those are each year now?
What's that?
The sports fees, what each?
The $300 is the newest one for hockey. Okay, the others continue to be less than that, like a $50, $55.
It's 50.
And must,
50?
It's 50.
Okay.
yeah, well, that's what I said, yeah. Okay, well, all right. Yeah, and complete service and work. Like, for example, the gourmet dinner, there's almost 200 students who worked the gourmet dinner 2 weeks ago to raise money at $140 a plate.
Okay. Who are you participating with in hockey?
Hockey?
Yeah.
We've had a partnership with the Grafton schools for many years.
Okay.
But we expect the MIAA Athletic Association not to allow that to continue and would expect us to go on our own. So we want to give the kids, we don't want to pull that from them. But in order to fund it, we haven't unveiled this totally. But the plan is to ask the parents for $300 for the hockey participant. That is our plan. That'll be my recommendation to the school committee.
Okay. I paid $850. That's okay.
Yeah, I was going to say hockey, for hockey, that's a pretty good price.
Yeah, but that's okay. So, how about that, the same concept? What are BBT kids doing in terms of, there's a word, I can't think of the word, the consortiums, right? The sports where we're, like you said, participating with Grafton and hockey. Are there any other sports that you know of where the kids are participating with other schools?
Sure.
In order to make that program?
Another example would be wrestling.
Okay,
Okay?
Yeah.
But in many cases, we have our own.
okay, okay.
Because the interest in participation is so great.
Okay. And then how about things like the extracurriculars? I know when my kids were in Douglas that, maybe it was the bands or the choir things were coming back to Douglas, right? That you didn't have that program, but they were participating.
We have choir, okay? We do not have band.
Okay.
So there is an ample menu of extracurricular activities.
Okay.
Okay? There's even a French club that meets in the morning.
A what?
A French club that meets in the morning. So,
And so one of the things I did notice, and you talked about it, in your ROI page,
right.
in years past, right, we've had this discussion, years past, the line said, we have the highest test scores of any of the towns or any of the school systems in the community, right? 13 towns, but the BBT numbers coming back were higher than any of those 13 towns. It doesn't say that this year. And no disrespect, I love that.
Yeah.
Because that suggests to me that you're pulling some kids who don't have great test scores, who might want to go into the trades, for lack of too much of generalization.
Yeah, the test.
Is that, bear with me, Mike. Mark, are you involved enough in 1 year? Are you, and as a parent, and as an alum?
In the past year, it's all been revolving around COVID. You know, how are we going to fit MCAS testing in and things like that? So I don't know a lot of the, at this point, it's been great that kids get to go back to school with no masks on.
Okay, fair enough.
In the last cycle, I want to make a comment about that.
Yeah,
okay?
sure.
It was not uncommon that many of my colleagues across the state anticipated the state would give a pass on MCAS, would not have the high-stakes accountability testing. They thought the decision would be made, because there was a lot of guesses to be made throughout COVID, all right, but that they anticipated it'd be a free pass, a skip for a year. We did not think that would happen. We met as a leadership team, academic teams, and brought people together, special ed teams and guidance counselors, and said, let's not anticipate that. Let's do everything possible, even in a remote world, if we're not over from the Department of Health and others, didn't allow us to come together, which is the major benefit of our instruction, okay? Let's do everything we can, and it paid off, okay? And that we don't necessarily, in this last cycle, didn't top all 11 other school districts in every category. So that's why that's worded in that way. So we don't mean to take anything away, the effort of the kids. But there's no entrance to come in, and the test, that you start preparing for this test even before you get in, I guess, kind of thing, as soon as you get in, right? But it's a 10th grade test, that the state administers, not us.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Anybody else, questions or comments? Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the conference in the school.
Appreciate it. All righty, we'll carry on, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Is our town administrator here?
Have a great day.
You too, take care.
Okay, thanks.
Good job. Keep it on safe.
So pretty low increase from last year this year.
Well, but the Phil's point,
Yeah.
because we have
Not every day I shake my
Matt?
Matt?
$3,000 more. It's lovely when you're trying to get it approved.
I hope the numbers match what I shared with you in advance.
You have anything for us, Mr. Town
I thought my
Administrator?
comment was good.
Like the Easter Bunny, I have a whole basket.
I see line 58 down to 0.
Oh, it's got kielbasa.
This is what they do. They get you when you're tired. They get you down. They throw a lot of stuff out.
So our town administrator is going to give us an update.
I'm going to distribute two separate documents, one at a time, so I don't confuse anyone.
What are you looking at me? That I'm the easiest one confused at the table?
My eyes are so tired from staring at this that you're the only person I can see.
Okay.
I do get confused a little sometimes. Just figured I'd throw that out there.
We appreciate it.
We didn't need to
And we're
hear
here
it.
to clarify.
We are.
In the interest of interest of self-disclosure, you know,
Okay, it looks like that.
like that whole calculation with Blackstone Valley Tech. I don't know how that works. Apparently, the ability to pay is very interesting.
What do you have for us, Matt? What's the first handout?
The whole school funding system is based on that initial calculation.
Yeah, well, you will not be able to explain it to me
No.
within
I
the
think-
next
Oh,
3
that
hours.
part, I got that part. When we talked about how the
But if you ever tried to replicate what the math,
It would never fly.
351 different
no,
calculations.
It's like cell phone math. You just can't.
no, there's
you can't
missing
get it.
steps.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anyhow, Mr. Chairman, what I've just distributed is my mark of the budget, so it is a balanced budget. Working from the department head's requests, I started off with, I'm gonna not know the exact high water mark, but I believe I was up to $478,000 deficit. So that was the inability of the town to fund the request of the department heads based on the revenue projections we had. So this cheat sheet, if you will, I haven't written a narrative yet because I finished this late this afternoon. So I distributed this electronically to the Finance Committee and to the Select Board. Nothing needs to be decided tonight because you have actually a little bit more than 2 weeks to cogitate, mull over, ask questions, as does the Select Board. But after being very familiar with the numbers and the needs of the departments, this is my best college try at coming up with the best possible budget for the town. I don't always get an A. My recently deceased professor I used to refer to as B+ Madeline because she never saw fit to give me an A no matter how brilliant I was in her class because we were not on the same wavelength in terms of world affairs.
Was that
But
Deceased last week?
yes.
so you had her as a teacher?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. For 3 semesters.
No, serious, was it, Mary?
Yes.
Yeah. She was a very cool person,
Yeah.
but she never gave me an A. So, whatever.
Have the department had seen this too, Matt?
So, no. I've been through some of the initial conclusions with people that it affected, but I have time tomorrow set aside where I'm going to pull everybody in and go over this with them. So what is it? It is a budget that totals $32,256,976, which is an increase over last year of $941,655. And it represents a reduction from the department head's request of $275,519 worth of spending, and an increase of just about $200,000 in projected revenues. After consultation with the finance director, I got almost halfway to closing the deficit by reviewing our revenue numbers. We typically are extremely conservative with our forecasts, and sometimes when we look at the pipeline and we look at recent years' performance, we know that that may not be the best solution. So this year, we're a bit bullish on new growth, so instead of budgeting 150,000, we're going to budget 250,000. We haven't been at that level for several years now, and with all the building permits and planning board, subdivision applications, even if only half of them actually ever got built, we'd easily cover the new growth. This is second increase to revenues is building department revenues. We added $100,000 to that estimate. Now, we already had an extra 150 from building permit revenues in the initial revenue budget. We have already, in the past few weeks, had 15 new home building permits pulled for the year that we're in. And next year, we have one subdivision that presented to tech review yesterday that was 100 lots. Others that are smaller.
Where do we have room for 100 lot subdivision?
Caswell Court.
Oh.
So, and then we have all the commercial activity we've discussed ad nauseum here. So we felt this was, the building official feels like he's going to recognize somewhere between 500 and 600,000, and we're going to budget 250 above and beyond the normal run, which should be about 100. So we're budgeting about 50% of what we expect to come in. The best news of the day, I was able to make history today. I was able to say to Courtney Keegan that she made my day because she opened the bids for school bus transportation, and there was $105,000 less than she had put in the budget and that I had put in my budget. So that was a godsend. Not entirely unexpected. I thought, she's not there. I didn't really think 450,000 was going to stick. I just can't imagine how that could have been possible. So it didn't actually materialize. And that was the easy part. All these other bullet points were the difficult part. I will say from the outset that I do not believe that any department head asked for anything that they didn't truly need.
Okay.
Right? So I don't feel like anyone gave me a well-marbled cut of, chuck to throw in the crock pot. This was all lean figuring based upon where they thought their needs were and their most immediate priorities. I don't have the luxury, though, of being able to pass on a budget with a huge deficit, so I didn't. My fundamental, you pre-commit to the rules that you think you want to guide the overall organization. And I pre-committed to the rule that I didn't want any interruption to the existing service level to occur. Fundamentally, what that means for us is that a couple of things. One, the compensation has to keep track and pace with our neighboring communities and with similarly situated communities. We've fallen far behind, and it's not going to be solved in one budget year. Because when I costed out, it was too much to try to accomplish in one fiscal year for the municipal budget. So my proposal to the select board and to the finance committee is that this year I work with the existing compensation table, so people in their existing grade and step. And instead of a 2% COLA, I give them a 4% COLA. To set the personnel budget up to complete the reform of the compensation table in the next budget year. My goal would be to have the personnel bylaw rewrite and compensation table reconstruction on the November special town meeting, so that when I go to budget for the next annual, I will have the table already in place. Fundamentally, what I want to do is different than anything that I've talked to with the school department. It's a different mindset. I want to make our town compensation table a lot like our union contracts. We don't do 10 steps one after another with our unions. We do probationary wage, then we do their entry-level wage. We usually give them a bump either at year 2 or year 2.5. then either at year 3 or 4, and then they don't get another bump until year 5, and then year 10, and then year 15. And if they're with us long enough, 20. That is a very different construct. When I look at what I have to offer the market in order to get an applicant pool for the different positions in town, I'm typically not offering step 1 on our existing comp table, I'm offering step 5. So I want to take step 5 and make it the new step 1. With a probationary wage for probationary employees, 95% of step 1, and then have step 2 and step 3, and I would go from 3 to 5, from 5 to 10, 10 to 15.
So Matt, what's the, process is the right word, but what's the kind of time frame for redoing all that then?
So,
I mean,
this budget has the 4% COLA in it. That will get some people close to where they're going to end up, especially if they're new employees. For those people who've been here a lot longer, you can imagine a couple people, I don't even need to name names, just people who've been here for about 15 years and been in their grade for 15 years. If their step 5 on their table is the new step 1, where are they going to be? So it was a big chunk of money, that's why I can't do it all in 1 year. So the process is working with the personnel board and the select board to refine this down from all of these grades and all of these steps into something that's much simpler and tied to the job description and sensitive to the issues we've had to deal with already, pay equity and some of the other things that we've had to accommodate.
So you think it'll take 2 years?
or
That'll
3
get
years.
us closer to the surrounding towns' pay grades for similar positions.
Yeah.
So we have more people from track to come here for.
Yeah, and you see, because I watch the boards, I see what happens. Those communities that haven't caught up yet, notably, there's a town, you may have heard of it, Sturbridge. They're out looking for a town accountant. They're scratching their head, they didn't get any applicants. That's because you're offering $69,000 for a town accountant. Nobody is ever going to take the job for that in this day and age. Just, I don't know how much you can strip out of the job description to get to that salary, but it's not even close. It's about half of what it would take for a town like Sturbridge to get the right person. So some people have a lot of thinking to do. I think there are others that have gone way overboard on the other side. So we have to end up somewhere that's rational and that the community can support. And that's the other part of it, is it doesn't make any sense to put a system in place if the community can't support it with its tax base. It has to be reflective of the pace that Douglas is able to grow these things.
So our committee will see the fruits of that work when it comes time to the wages part of certain department budgets, correct?
Right.
Yep.
But the support for the 4% will be key. And that's key to going back to my core principle that I pre-committed to maintain service levels. The second thing is to address any aspect of any departmental organization that is either implicates the safety or the workplace conditions or their ability to just do their job. Can they get the material that they need? Can they repair the things that are broken? Can they move along? And this has been, I think over the years, you look carefully at the expense side of everybody's budget because it's a little bit less painful to cut expenses than it is to cut people or to hold people back from getting COLAs or steps. So you go, logically, you go to the expense budget. And for years they were very tightly managed, but now we're seeing the seams come unraveled just a little bit. Some of the hand equipment has gotten older. It just needs to be replaced. Some of the things that we buy are more expensive than they ever were before. So we need to accommodate the pressure on the expense budgets. So the expense budgets this year will have a certain robust quality because it really reflects what we have to do to run the departments. So I didn't really take very much money out of anybody's expense budget in order to try to balance. So going back, so what did I have to do now? So now we're calling, the decreases. I'm going to go through both decreases and increases. The 4% COLA program didn't automatically apply in the spreadsheet to public safety managers, but they are not in the union, and they have traditionally gotten the same COLA as all other non-union employees. So I had to revise those 4 personnel from a 2% COLA to a 4%. That effect was minor. It was all told about call it $4,700. I reduced the fire department's overtime request, so that's on the fire side, not ambulance, fire, by $10,000. That trends more closely to historical figures for the fire department, so I wanted to bring that down by about 10. Mr. Furno requested an extra FTE, so that's a brand new FTE above and beyond his existing payroll. I couldn't justify a new FTE with the pressure I was under with the budget, so I postponed that 1 year. So I put it in the 2024 forecast budget and took the $45,391 out of his budget request. Removing that FTE had a secondary effect on snow and ice because we calculate the snow and ice overtime estimate based upon total payroll in the highway department. So removing the extra FTE won us $63.91. The fire department salary change, we've had a departure of an individual who was at a pay grade firefighter paramedic step 1 in the budget, and will be replaced by a firefighter basic. So it doesn't have the paramedic credential, so that saves us $17,298. I made a minor adjustment to the town clerk's budget. She needed to revise. She's having more elections in this fiscal year than we had previously budgeted for, so she's having 3. And then you've got 16 people who work 14 hours at $17.01. The state feels bad that they're making us keep the polls open a couple of extra hours in the morning, so they give us a little grant, so the grant nets out. So overall, the clerk's budget was increased by $21.48. School department FICA. FICA is dependent on the payroll and the size of the payroll. So when the payroll goes up, your FICA obligation goes up. They don't carry it in their budget. We carry it on our side. This is the one true mystery to me of how we budget in this town. We actually carry the school department's FICA. It only went up $71.34, but just for giggles, I mean, look at the line item. It's $183,000. So it's a pretty big subsidy to the schools. Property and casualty premium, that was good news.
Matt, should that be looked at?
No.
Town carry?
I think it's a can of worms at this point, and I don't see the benefit. I'm going to grouse about it because I spent all day trying to balance the budget, but just at this point, we've reached whatever detente or whatever demarcation we're going to reach with the school department and who pays for what. I just want people to be mindful when they think of each new tax dollar that's raised. You can't just look at the school budget. You have to look at what we pay for out of the municipal budget that supports school operations. That's a much more fair understanding of it.
Well, where it shows up is 6 of 1, half dozen.
In the end, it doesn't really matter, right? It's the same people paying the same bills for it. So I was pleasantly surprised. I had budgeted a 12% increase in our property and casualty premium based on our claims history and our rather miserable loss ratio on the property casualty side. But a rabbit magically appeared and advised me that 12% really is more like 6%. And where we're going to get hit this year is a small part of our account called the carrier is Chubb, and what they're protecting us against is the risk of injury on duty for public safety employees. We had large claims in 2018 and 2019 that were still in our look back. So our Chubb premium is going to go up 15 to 20%, but it's a small bill compared to the overall property casualty. So I thought 8% was a rational figure. But what that did was it got us $19,800 back into the budget. This deserves some explanation. We have a regional organization for provision of animal control services, and our intermunicipal agreement expires this June. So the existing group got together and reached out to additional communities and said, do you want to join? And if you want to join, it would have a dilutive effect on the cost of the program. And because we were making the extra effort to regionalize the town of Uxbridge, never to shrink from finding a way to get a grant, got a best practices grant from Community Compact. That covers about half the cost of our ACO, intermunicipal agreement, for the first year. So this year, we're going to carry about $19,000 for animal control. Be mindful that next year it'll be $38,000 because the grant's picking up about 50% of the cost. And that $38,000 represents a little bit more than a doubling of the cost.
Who's in the group?
Oh, you'd have to ask that. I mean,
Is it just
the new member is Millbury, right?
Okay.
It's us and Uxbridge and Millville and Blackstone. The costs are going to go up a little bit because a lot of good work was done. It really compliments to the chief of police in the town of Uxbridge, who kind of led this effort to find the right shelter and the right people to bring, to take care of the animals at the shelter and work out the system. Blackstone's role in this is key because they have a shelter that was created by an endowment from an animal lover. So it is a public shelter. The one model that I've used in the past, or was forced to use in the past, that I really hate is the notion of renting cages at a private kennel or a vet's office, because that ends up being a huge expense to a municipality. You pay for the cage even if it's empty. They may have a different view on when to put animals down. It just is never a good relationship. So this is going to work out really good for us, but it is be a little bit more costly next year. So
we're sharing it, but it's more costly? I'm trying to understand that one.
because it's a higher level of service. So we'll have 2 people on instead of 1, and the shelter will be Blackstone.
Makes sense, Phil?
Yeah, the level of service right now, Phil, if you've never had to call, the level of service is pretty low.
Just trying to find the ACO.
Got to find the person. Yeah.
I mean, if you've been on Dynamic Douglas, you've seen, anyone know where the ACO is? You
Yeah.
know, who is it now?
So I think we've solved that riddle here. Gene and I also agreed that our self-insurance fund for unemployment compensation could be reduced from $40,000 to $30,000. Given that we're trying to pursue better compensation for people, we didn't see people running out the door. We also have not tested that boundary ever. So I think the high watermark in the last 10 years has been like 22, 25,000, never 40. This one hurt me. Now we're starting to get into pain here. I felt pretty strongly about increasing our budget for legal counsel. I wanted to change our overall satisfaction with the quality and quantity of service we get from our attorneys. I just can't do it this year, so I had to take $15,000 out of the increase. It's still going to go up by $4,000 because the billing rates change a little bit. We have another public safety departure, this time in the police department. We have a young officer who's leaving to join the Rhode Island State Police, and we'll be replacing him with a probationary officer that saves us $65.69. The ambulance part-time wages, I reduced by $10,000. The chief requested a $25,000 increase, and at this point, it's trying to get close to the finish line, we had to start cutting into these things. So I felt, again, based on historical figures, that the $15,000 increase was more than adequate, and the $10,000 was too much. The extra $10,000 was too much. You may recall the building commissioner asked for 2 pieces to this. One was to take the stipends for wiring and plumbing and other trades inspectors and bring them back up to their historical levels because they have been reduced. So that's not being touched. So we're going to bring them back up to their historical rates and pay them the stipends they used to earn in the couple of 6, 7 years ago. And we're still going to give them an additional stipend based on the workload. The plan review and inspections for these large commercial buildings is a significant tax on people's time. So Ken was looking for flexibility to give them, if they're going to be spending 3 or 4 days straight doing things, which is not the pattern, right? They might do a couple inspections a week. Now they're going to be spending full days with us to give them some extra compensation. He requested $20,000. I reduced it to $15,000. I'm making an assumption that we have a retirement coming up at Highway, and my assumption is that we're going out of our way to cultivate a relationship with one of our part-time employees to get the qualifications and exposure to the department to fill that seat. What I left in the budget was about 4 months of double pay. So I want John to recruit the new person right away, July 1, promote the person, and then when the retiree leaves at the end of the calendar year, there would be all that time to train the new person. So the budget still has that in it. That being the case, rather than hiring the next part-time worker at the same number of hours as the current guy's working, I just cut it in half. Again, that is not something I really want to do, but at this point, we're getting pretty close to running out of ideas to get to zero, at least from my perspective. I had a fuel inflator all across the budget, all across the town, to increase the price of diesel and gasoline in the budget by a 25% markup, just so that we're not caught unawares with this. I'm somewhat encouraged by the settling of the markets, and I think 20% is a little bit more realistic. It's still a big increase. So, and then lastly, I had $7,167 left, and I had brought snow and ice up by, I forget, 48,000 or so. I was getting it pretty, starting to approach 300,000. The 7167 would come from John didn't do this. I had put it into his request because I thought it was a missing thing. Every year we compete for snowplow drivers, and we look at the Mass DOT rate, and we look at the towns around us, and we increase our rates to be, actually, this is one place where we try to stay actually ahead of the curve, because being a small town with a lot of roads, it can be hard to recruit private businesses. We got a lot of people in this town that own their own trucks and own their own plows, and they're very good workers for us. Again, I had a 25% inflator there. This brings it down to about 20% instead of 25%. So the budget at the moment is balanced. This is the format that is published in the Finance Committee flyer. It's not exactly what Gene shows, but it is the same categories. So the two columns farthest to the right, I'm showing you the difference between my proposed budget and the fiscal '22 approved budget without STM. I need Gene to update that to include whatever we put in the budget for STM. But it's not going to be a huge difference. And then the farthest column to the right is the change from my department head's requests. Okay, so you can see where I'm supposed to print out in red. It's kind of a maroon, but it is not black.
Can't afford it, it's not expensive.
Any questions for
I print far less than anyone else, so when I do, I indulge myself with color, because I live in the world of color.
So Gene, are we pretty sure about the income that we have to play with for the budget for next year, or might there be a major surprise somewhere along the way?
I don't anticipate a major surprise. I think we're less conservative as we've been in the past. So when we get to the fall town meeting, new growth has increased to 250. You're not going to be looking at maybe supplementing the budgets to the same extent we have in the past.
Okay.
So once you get closer to that actual number, you look at other things like, what's going to go back into free cash, and, will we have the supplement the same as we have in the fall? But I'm pretty confident we're going to hit the levels we're projecting.
Okay. And then Matt, the big projects coming forward, or looking forward, that we hope will be substantive, are they more or less on track time-wise, or have there been some hiccups in the process that you know of?
There have been hiccups, but I think we've overcome them.
Okay.
So I'm going to give Bob and Eric a T-shirt that says "Never Say Die," because he's like the Terminator. You know, remember when the arm was crawling across? You can't tell the guy no. Or me either. So we've solved some supply chain problems, and you'll actually be eyewitness to delivery of truckloads of pipe to different locations in town. You'll see them at the wastewater plant, and you'll see some pipe being dropped at the parking lot across from the Schuster Mill, and that will be pre-positioning materials. So we are actually going to hit a deadline that most of the communities are going to struggle to hit because of the supply chain problems.
But in terms of paperwork and things that need
So
to be signed.
we'll be out to bid for a contract.
That's pretty good.
For the water main installation. The property issues have largely, well, they're more than largely, they're almost completely resolved. So with the town of Uxbridge, we've filed all the Mylars and taken care of some deed issues. The land that the town of Douglas owns in the town of Uxbridge on the other side of the line that suitors were interested in. And as far as the eminent domain proceeding, it was filed. So really that's over. Title is clear at this point. And I think some people were disappointed the Pro Tanto town meeting approved $1. But you know, the enshrined will of the owner of record was to donate the property to the town, and he had done all of the necessary work to do that. And in the end, didn't file this piece of paperwork because there was a remainder interest that needed to sign. She was willing to sign, but I don't know, he passed away, or there's some confluence of events. But at this point, Rich Bowen is working on a purchase and sales. When that is completed, we'll be finally able to take the check and deposit it in the town's account. That was $400,000. I anticipate.
How about the project across from the pond on Gilboa Street? Any idea when they're going to start building that bridge over the Mum Road? I mean, is that year?
Well, they're in permitting right now.
Okay.
So interested citizens should pay attention to that process at the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board.
Okay.
Because that whole thing is being permitted now.
Did the planning board approve it on March 10th?
I think Planning Board did. I think it's, Concom is now working out the bridge discussion.
Okay.
I don't follow the blow-by-blow because I think it would go completely bonkers if I did. It's a good site,
one
though.
thing
It
to
doesn't
say,
really trigger any major,
Yeah,
you know,
that's fine.
permitting hurdles.
Warning bells are off that week.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I updated this committee or not, but I should. Just bear reference to, you know, I think you know we got a MassWorks grant for $3 million. There was a decision early on by the powers that be at the Commonwealth that they didn't want to support the project's need for natural gas because they did not feel that the natural gas provider had enough skin in the game, because they only offered us a couple $100,000 for a multi-million-dollar pipe extension. What the state officials were completely unaware of and subsequently became educated on, again, thanks to Mr. Never Say Die, is that Eversource has built a very expensive step-down gate in Sutton that's very close to the site. And so they do have skin in the game. They have $8-point-some-odd million in the game, and the extension of the pipe is contemplated when they decided to build a step-down gate. So there's a lot of miscommunication. So long story short, the Commonwealth has amended our MassWorks grant, and we are getting $4 million, not $3 million. So the extra $1,700,000 of it is for the state's share of the gas project to bring gas to the buildings that are going to be built.
Right.
The other $300,000 is they are aware of cost overruns due to supply chain constraints. So the $300,000 is additional cushion for our entire budget for the project. We are awaiting the federal grant decision. It's been, let me tell you something. Remember Pilgrim's Progress, remember that book, you know? Every time he goes over another hillside to some other monster that's trying to destroy his life or whatever. That's what this EDA grant has been like. It's like, oh my God, am I there yet? Am I there yet? No, we need a Form 65/350. And when was the town incorporated again? It's like, oh my gosh. We're trying to make sure that our federal friends understand their own rules. They keep looking for the complete audit of a single audit. We don't do a single audit because we don't get that much federal aid. We didn't trigger it until the year we're in right now. We haven't triggered it since 2016. And they're casting them out looking for this thing. It's like, what are you looking for? It's not there. But it's frustrating, but it's still worth it because we know that we're in the running for it.
Okay.
But I won't go to compromise somebody's position at the federal government by saying more than that. But I think we're in good shape.
So we'll have some natural gas coming into the new project potentially.
So that means that everything that is in between the end of that pipe and the town line is now quote-unquote site ready.
Will
Pad
there
ready.
ever be a plan to expand?
So it's a huge benefit to the Pine Pit.
Hands on.
Because anything built in there now would simply have to run to the street to get gas,
Greatly.
water, and sewer. And that's the coin of the realm. When you do economic development, if you can have those three utilities within reach, you can sell anything.
How do I get gas to my house?
Move right next door.
So there's a method for that. We take a truck.
Next to the well.
We can take liquid gas, we can drive it to your house.
No, I don't want propane. I want gas. How do I get?
So I think that's where we are. I invite comments, questions.
Yeah.
Anybody comment or question for Matt?
Is
On his update?
the balanced budget going to be on our SharePoint site somewhere?
It already is.
In the same form as the budget that we've been kind of working on? Or is it just going to be this one? This format?
Just said it's there.
Yeah, no, I heard that it's there, but I'm saying,
So-
is it in the same format as this we're seeing right here? Or is it in the one that we've been used to or accustomed to?
Not that
over the
anyone would
last-
ever accuse me of punching somebody who's already down, but I have this budget in so many different forms that if you can think of it, I've done it already. It's in the same.
I know, it's crazy, it's almost
So
confusing.
to get this, you go to the tab that says FinCom Flyer
Right,
to get this format.
yep,
You go to the tab that says Budget
yep.
to get the line-by-line accounting.
That's what I'm looking for. Is there a budget
It's on the
that
SharePoint.
that is on there that's actually the same as this then?
That bigger spreadsheet generates
Yeah.
a smaller summary.
Beautiful, thank you.
Anybody else for Matt?
Oh, yeah, the one last thing on the, those eminent domain thing. Is there any way that I can get a copy of what is going on there from a paperwork standpoint?
The registry of deeds. It's online.
It's already, is there no finance? Because I think we approved $1 for that transaction. I'm wondering, did we spend $1?
No, you approved the dollar for pro tanto,
Yeah.
Pro tanto,
so that's the value of the land.
okay.
The actual spending was whatever the filing fee was, not much.
Who did we end up taking, like, the land from? Didn't we have, like, a question on that?
No,
We found out who it
we
was?
found all the heirs and we sent them notice.
Okay, so is there a way, the way that I would have to get that information would be to go on public records? Or can we get it in our office through you guys?
Well, if you want a copy of the filing, that's easy.
It's more of just a curiosity than anything else.
So if you want a copy of the filing, that's easy. So it's a piece of paper that says the town is taking this particular piece of land, describes the metes and bounds of the land. For records, we didn't really create a public record, but I suppose we have a record of all the heirs. And we have the postage receipts that they were all sent. Most of them were signed for.
Okay. I'm just curious about the whole eminent domain process, and it seems to me that it would be a public process, right?
It was.
It was.
Okay.
Town meeting voted it and we did it.
You were part of that.
Yeah, no, I was
I mean,
part of
just,
some of
you
it.
voted no, but, I mean, it doesn't change the fact that it was all dealt with.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious about the process and the actual intricacies of the whole thing.
Well, I think that would be the point. It's not intricate.
Right.
So once the town votes to file eminent domain, that's what we do. We take the order of taking and we file it at the registry of deeds. Then we take a notice of taking and we send it to any potential heirs that may want to contest the value.
Right.
Yep.
If they want to contest the process, that train is out of the station. Yeah,
Yeah, they can contest the value.
they contest the
And
value.
that, you know, if 18 of them got together, I suppose, or agreed, then they probably have to give some money for a lawyer.
The burden is very difficult for someone, if you have a small piece of land that's been
Right.
taken, which may not have much value. You have to hire an appraiser, an attorney, file your action, and then sustain all of the attorney's fees as you contest the action.
Yeah.
So if you have a 20-acre parcel and the town of Hutzpah takes it from you, and it's an industrial site and has value of, $50,000 an acre, well, it makes a lot of sense. Go ahead and, you're gonna fight that.
Make
But if it's a
it $1.
3-acre lot with 20-some odd acres and it's maybe worth $10,000, nobody's ever gonna contest it. Nobody in their right mind.
So so what I'm hearing is if it's a small piece of land, it's much easier for the state or the city to take it. Or
No,
town.
that's not what it said, Phil. No, that's what you wanted to hear, Phil.
No, well, that's what I heard. Tell me.
Phil, anything else?
It was.
Yeah,
it was
I'm just
given
interested in the
to-
paperwork.
it was
No, you're
given
interested
to
in the
us.
process,
It was
Phil.
given, there was just a glitch in the filing, and
Yeah.
it was gifted to.
I'm just a big fan of property rights, that's all.
We know,
Yeah.
we know.
All right. We're going to move on. So Matt, anything else?
No,
Or any questions for Matt? All right, thank you. So if,
Hey, everybody's got their own thing.
Yeah,
I'm a big
fair.
fan of the Constitution and property rights.
We know.
Big, big fan. Huge.
we're carrying on, everybody. So if you look at your agendas, we're going to hold off on approving the minutes to another meeting.
Oh, poor Gene. Gene's been here
What?
hours.
So February 8, February 22, you should have those.
I printed out copies.
Yeah.
I will not print again. We're trying
Yeah.
to conserve paper.
We have no reserve fund transfers, correct? Now, what's going to be on our agenda for April 4, other than meeting minutes for February meetings?
I think discussing the budget would be,
But we have no more people to talk to us and present.
not
anything,
unless
right?
you would like to request people in. I think you're really going to review the budget. It is going before the Board of Selectmen on the 5th.
So this is what our homework will be for the 4th, next Monday at 6 PM, right, everybody?
Yeah, and the Board of Selectmen will be receiving that on the 5th, so if you had any comments, that would be
Yeah.
the time. And then your public hearing is on the 12th.
So for our next Monday, everybody at 6, have this along, and then your 2 meeting minutes of the February meetings.
And we should have the draft warrant language for you on the 4th as well.
Okay.
Okay, so we changed it to 6, right?
6 PM, Monday in the planning board room, right?
Correct.
And there's no Zoom.
No Zoom.
So,
And there won't be changes to this between now and Monday, right?
I don't want to touch this for at least
Got it.
4 or 5
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, okay.
does anybody else have anything
I have a motion.
last minute?
It's a privilege motion.
Gee,
You can
let
make
me
it
guess
anytime
what
you
that-
want.
What is that motion?
Have a motion,
I
Howard?
have a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
So the motion made by Howard, seconded by Lynn to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, opposed? Unanimous, motion carries. We are adjourned.